Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, a conversation with President and CEO of CattleFax, Randy Blach. We'll talk about 2023 and what to look forward to in 2024 in the cattle industry. We'll also have features from Kansas Corn, Kansas Wheat, and the Kansas Farm Bureau, along with a weekly update for the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, KFB.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agriculture news, USDA is accepting applications for the Continuous Conservation Reserve Program sign-up. Farm Service Agency encouraging ag producers and landowners interested in those conservation opportunities for their land in exchange for yearly rental payments to consider the enrollment options available through Continuous CRP. Now, it also includes the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program offered by FSA partners. Now, additionally, producers participating in CRP can apply to re-enroll now if their contract expires this year. FSA Administrator Zach Ducheneau said continuous CRP is one of the best conservation tools to provide producers and landowners. Said whether a producer wants to focus on water quality benefits or work with one of the partners to address natural resource concerns in their area, the program offers many options to help meet those resource conservation goals. To submit an offer, producers and landowners need to contact your local FSA office by July 31st. Well, the winter wheat acre planted for 2024 harvest estimated 34.4 million acres, 6% below 2023, but 3% higher than last year. Kansas and Texas, the two states with the largest acreage, expected to be down 7% and 8% respectively. Michigan, Utah expected to plant a record low number of acres as well. Hard red winter wheat seeded area expected to be 24 million acres. That's 5% below 2023. The largest drop, again, is in Kansas as well as Texas. And water use reports due by March 1st in Kansas. Failure to file prior to the date could result in civil penalties between $250 and $1,000. Reports can be filed online or via paper, but the Department of Agriculture Division of Water Resources, the old DWR, does charge a $20 filing fee per water right if you submit it by paper. The fee can be avoided by reporting online, kswaterusersreport.org. The PIN and ID printed on the lower left-hand corner of that water use report that was mailed out this month will be needed to file electronically. That is a check of ag news. Randy Blach from CattleFax will join us after this break.
The Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
Well, at the Kansas Livestock Association annual meeting in Wichita, we always catch up with Randy Blach, the CEO of CattleFax. This year's no different. Always good to have you in Kansas.
Thank you. Always good to be back.
All right, so every year this time we talk about we prognosticate how things might be, but let's look back on this year, Randy. We have seen just a little bit of everything in this cattle market.
Oh, we really have. I mean, this has been a fascinating time for all of us. I shared with the group in the convention audience this morning that think back where we were a year ago. Early January, we were selling fed cattle at $1.55. By the time we got to the first week in June, they're at $1.85. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. average went to $1.88. We're selling cattle in Nebraska in the low 90s. And we spent 27 weeks in that range, and then boom, we're right back in here to 175 today. But I think the perspective I would share with everybody is remember, we all could see that we were in this stage of the cycle. We're going to see the markets start to move up and to the right. They were going to be higher. But as you get into this stage of it, things get pretty volatile and they get to swinging. And I think what we've seen in here is a market that probably got a little bit too aggressive on the upside. We're kind of retrenching in here, but the key thing is we've got profitability back in the industry. We're really not seeing much expansion yet, but we do expect that we're still going to see the industry expand here over time.
A year ago when we talked right here, you said 23 is going to be a good year. Overall, if you pull back a little bit, it has been, but there has been some challenges. We also see where feeder cattle were this fall on fire, and you look at, okay, trying to place those, you make sure you have your corn price that helps put that in there as well. So it's almost not necessarily a perfect storm like we've seen in years past, but as we look at next spring, because of where some of those feeders were, we need to move beef.
Yeah, we need to move beef. I mean, we've got some elevated break-evens, absolutely no doubt about it. We got a lot of break-evens on cattle that will market out of feed yards over the course of the next 3 to 5 months, from the mid-80s up to $2. So let's just call it a 190 break-even. We're sitting here with the market today at 175. And again, where the futures have broken to here over the last several weeks, there's no hedge out there. So again, it's one of those situations, but we've just come through the second best profit year in the history of the feeding industry. So people have healed up. I mean, there's been some good money made. This will be again a year that you don't see these kind of feeding margins very often. So people have got a little bit of a war chest around them as we come through here.
Randy Blach is the CEO of CattleFax at the KLA meeting in Wichita, where he presented to the group assembled. We'll take a quick break, back with more in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And Randy Blach, the CEO of CattleFax, is joining us. You know, I would guess we've all talked about this since January when the inventory report came out of what's going to happen. Are we going to retain heifers? Are we at the part of the cycle where we're going to expand this herd? What we saw because of early in the spring and when we saw a lot of cows, a lot of heifers go to market, where are we at? Where do you see this? Will we see some retention based off this upcoming crop then?
Well, I think just to remind everybody out there, it takes two things to expand. It takes profitability and it takes green grass and feed. Mm-hmm. So those combinations. So I just ask you what we've seen relative to those two things. Obviously, we have profitability at today's price levels, don't we? So we finally have some profitability, really the first time we've seen any profitability in cow-calf country since 2014-15. So that needle is moving in a positive fashion, but where so many of our cows are located, from Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, that region of the country, we haven't broke the drought. We don't have enough stock water. We don't have enough feed supplies. They got off to a great start in the spring. And come July 1, we just baked it off, didn't we, through those regions of the country. So that's the heaviest cow concentration area in the nation's beef cow herd. They don't have the feed water signal to go ahead and expand. So it's delayed.
Dr. Peel of Oklahoma State, though, has said, hey, the numbers he's looking at, and you all are also in the numbers business and the analytics, we could see this next report that comes out, early January, that shows the lowest herd since the early 60s. So then what does that mean then? Because again, if the demand isn't continue to be very strong, maybe a small herd is not, the worst thing in the world, so that we can keep those prices up.
The cow herd by itself will be the smallest beef cow herd since 1962 on January 1. So it is
Okay,
going to
happen.
It's going to happen. The U.S. beef cow herd, we believe, will be down about 600,000 head again on January 1. So that pretty well die has been cast. The key is, when do we actually send a signal out there? I mean, you all remember in the last cattle cycle in 14, 15, we were straight up and straight back down. Nobody wants to get caught again. So when you got high interest rates in here, you want to be sure that, hey, we're going to be able to hold things together. So that's been a situation that has kept people at pause as well. I do believe we'll see a slow expansion start as we get further into 2024. But again, we believe this cycle is going to be much different than the last one because of some of these other elements out here, particularly the cost of money. It is a big, big deal in here with interest rates where they are. So we think it'll be a more elongated cattle cycle as far as a slower herd rebuilding phase, where we should be able to keep our cow-calf producers at a more profitable level for an extended period of time.
Randy Blach is the CEO of CattleFax. He's joining us. We're going to take a break, come back, and as we always like to kind of wrap things up, get a little prognostication as we look into 2024. We'll do that in just a moment.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Hi, my name is Rachel and I'm an agronomist at K-State, and today we're going to talk about critical growth stages of corn. So you might be wondering why we care about what's happening to a corn plant when it's only a foot tall. Well, if you look at these two ears, you can see the difference between a corn plant that was taken very good care of during the season and one that had some issues during some critical parts of its development. Which one would you want to harvest if you were a farmer? I think I'd want to harvest this one, which is why we care about all these growth stages that we're going to talk about. And the first key stage is when it first comes out of the ground. That's VE, the vegetative emergence is what that stands for. Basically, that's when that corn plant first pops out of the ground, and that's when its life starts. So at that point, we want all of the corn plants to be coming up out of the ground at the same time, because if they don't come out of the ground at the same time, some of them are older or younger, which means that during pollination, which we'll talk about in a minute, but they wouldn't be pollinating at the same time, which means you may not have enough pollen to fill those ears. When we get to V5, like this plant here, this is a V5 plant, and V5 is important because during this time, the stem in corn first comes above the ground, which is kind of strange to think about. But this plant, as a V5 plant, everything you see here is all leaves. The stem is very, very small. At V5 is when that stem starts to have its growth spurt, and the stem actually starts growing above the ground. This is important because once that stem comes above the ground, anything that damages this plant can do permanent damage to that plant when we start looking at ear development. So that's really, really important. If we come over here, we can see some other stages of corn that we're going to be looking at. This plant is V12, which, if you'll recall, means it has 12 collared leaves. At this point, the ears are really starting to develop inside of this plant. We can't see them yet, but it's already determining how many kernels are going to be on each of those ears. Between V5 and V12, nitrogen fertilizer is something that's really important. The plant starts growing a lot, and these green leaves, there's a lot of nitrogen that's in these leaves, which means fertilizer is really important during this time. After plants get to be about this big, weeds aren't as much of a concern because the leaves start taking up more of the light, which means less of it can reach the ground, and weeds aren't as competitive at that point. So this plant will continue growing until we see a tassel popping out the top and silks coming out of our ears. When we see silks coming out of our ears, we know that we've reached R1, reproductive 1, the first stage of the reproductive cycle. We can see on this tassel, actually, we have some anthers that have popped out of this corn tassel and are dropping pollen. So what happens is this pollen lands on the ear, pollination, and then it fertilizes. But if we look at these silks, if you could be here and touch these corn silks with me, you would feel that they are very moist. There's a lot of water in these corn silks. They're over 90% water, actually. So if this plant is stressed and doesn't have enough water during R1, those silks will dry out and they won't be able to do their job. So that's why at R1, farmers, if they can irrigate, might put water on, because that will help make sure that our ears have enough water to do their job effectively. And if you'll remember that ear we had before, those 2 ears, looking at all these different stages, we know that each of them is important because it impacts what the farmer sees at the end of the season.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Scientists from K-State's Wheat Genetics Resource Center and the USDA's Agricultural Research Service, in partnership with Kansas Wheat, successfully used gene editing to reduce the presence of 2 types of gluten-coating genes called gliadins that are known to be abundant in immunoreactive peptides. We reduced the immunotoxicity caused by the gliadin genes in the wheat by 47-fold, said Edward Okanoff, University Distinguished Professor in K-State's Department of Plant Pathology and Director of the Wheat Genetics Resource Center. Okanoff said gluten likely will never be completely removed from the wheat since it is important for bread making. Gluten provides the texture, flavor, and moisture in such products as bread, bagels, pastries, noodles, and more. Okanoff added that even though reduced levels of gluten achieved in this study won't make wheat immediately safe for those with severe levels of celiac disease, it is important to step forward. The very nature of scientific study and wheat breeding means varieties with reduced gluten content may not be available to consumers for many years. Aaron Harries, Vice President of Research and Operations for Kansas Wheat, said the trait would not be included in all new varieties and most likely would be grown under contract with food manufacturers. Harries said, "Wheat research is focused on developing new varieties and meet the demands of the consumer. Developing wheat that is safer for celiac sufferers decreases the number of consumers forced to consider wheat alternatives." K-State's research, which has received funding from Kansas Wheat, USDA's National Institute for Food and Agriculture, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
The Grabby family farms and ranches in Ellis, Rush, Ness, and Trego counties. The Grabbies raise predominantly wheat and milo, along with corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and feed for cattle. Their cattle operation includes a cow-calf herd, and they run a backgrounding feed yard. Matt and Jennifer have raised their sons, Wyatt and Mark, on their farm, and their hope is they return someday. Mark is involved in FFA, and Wyatt is a member of the Collegiate Farm Bureau at Northwest Kansas Technical College. The Grabby family volunteers to ring bells for the Salvation Army, and Matt is the Assistant Chief of Ellis County Company 8 Volunteer Fire Department. Matt currently serves on the State Resolutions Committee and has served as the Ellis County Farm Bureau President for the last 10 years. Jennifer is a special education teacher and helps with local events for those with developmental disabilities. The Grabby's vision for Farm Bureau is to continue to be a strong voice for the farming and ranching community.
John and Jenny farm and ranch in Lincoln County with John's parents. They mostly raise no-till wheat, milo, and soybeans and run a Red Angus commercial cow herd. The couple work together on the farm and raise their 4 children, Tenley, Haley, August, and Emma. The Buttonhoffs have been active in Farm Bureau for more than 10 years. John serves on the Lincoln County Farm Bureau Board and manages a program that provides beef to the local school district. They've both been representatives of the YF&R Committee and participated in the YF&R National Conference. The couple helps facilitate the County Ag Day on the farm, which Jenny started during her role as county coordinator. Jenny is the head cook for the local school district and teaches Sunday school. John serves as the school board president, chairperson of the Lincoln County Conservation District, and is a member of the Education Foundation Board. The Buttonhoffs are confident the agriculture industry will continue to face the challenges of weather and regulations.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
The Kansas Beef Council and Kansas State University Research and Extension are hosting 6 beef quality assurance training and certification courses across the state in February and March. Dates and locations for the sessions are February 3rd in Basehor, February 9th in Coffeyville, February 20th in La Crosse, February 22nd in St. Francis, March 18th in Junction City, and March 26th in Syracuse. During each training, A.J. Tarpoff, K-State Associate Professor and Extension Beef Veterinarian, will cover topics including cattle care, planning for extreme weather, proper low-stress cattle handling techniques, and other matters critical to cattle production. These practices ensure a high-quality product, and the research-backed training helps generate consumer confidence. Additionally, a 2019 study shows there is nearly a $17 per head premium at auction for BQA certified lots. For more information or to register for one of the sessions, go to kansasbeef.org and click on Beef Hub. Another in-person BQA training and certification course will be held in conjunction with Cattle U on June 25th in Manhattan. It will be hosted by Certified Angus Beef and Cisco. More information about the session will be posted closer to time on cabcattle.com/raised-with-respect. For those unable to attend one of these trainings, online BQA courses always are available at bqa.org.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
This week, cold weather across the U.S. over the past 2 weeks, alongside a bearish USDA report on Friday, has most of the trade wanting to hide underneath the warm blankets. Specifically, the USDA updated U.S. corn and soybean production estimates, updated U.S. and world supply and demand balance sheets, and gave us our first look at planted acres for winter wheat in the United States. Let's get into the numbers. U.S. corn supplies rose versus previous estimates. Forecasted yield showed 177.3, a raise of 2.4 bushels from the December report. After changes of imports, total production, and feed usage, this left an ending stocks number of 2.1 billion bushels. This rose nearly 800 million from this time last year, which brings the U.S. total stocks and usage ratio up to 15%, a number last seen in 2018 as we dipped under 10% during the COVID food concern and drought buying spree of 2020-2021. U.S. soybean supplies also rose, but by a smaller percentage. Yield penciled in at 50.6 bushel per acre, up from 49.9 on the last report. A more neutral to slight raise in total ending stocks for beans ended with 280 million bushels, or a 6.7 stocks to use. This carryout is similar to our position this time last year, but with questions more focused on what really will come out of South American bean harvests. Overall, a bearish corn and more neutral bean report. Initial reactions were harshly sold off in both commodities, with beans able to stabilize and retreat from recent lows to a more modest close, down 12 cents on the day. Corn, on the other hand, plummeted post-report and never looked back, ending the day down 10 cents per bushel. Whether we debate the numbers or not, they are in fact the numbers the trade will factor on all balance sheets going forward until the March prospective plannings report, and we are subject to a bearish sold-off market in corn and soybeans, constantly relying on supply concerns as global prices are still lower than what the U.S. can offer on near all main commodities. U.S. all wheat planted acres rose with a small decline in HRW acres. Better conditions and spring weather outlook offset those lower acres and look for a higher production in those areas. But coming out of winter, both the U.S. and EU will determine where we are headed on wheat. Global carryout on wheat is lower than this time last year, as we saw cheaper, ample supplies of wheat leave the Black Sea areas despite the conflict amongst Russia and Ukraine. When it comes to following the day-to-day moves in an ever-changing agricultural markets, we at Pinion Risk Management look to be a trusted source of information for our clients, along with being a guiding hand on decision-making and reasoning towards a market plan. To learn more about our approach at Pinion Risk Management, please give us a call at 888-452-8751. I'm Tanner Burning with Pinion, and thank you for your time.
That's our program this week. Be social with us online, kansasagreport.net, or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.